Hello and welcome to the episode of Flying High with Flutter. I'm your host, allenwyma. Today I am with, I chose the wrong camera today. That's just not good. I was in a rush today.
I thought it was my name.
Yeah, sorry. No. I just chose the wrong camera. I just noticed it right now. That's kind of bugging me. All right, sorry, but today I'm with Cagatay Ulusoy. So how you say that?
Yes, you did it right. Yes,
Cagatay. Okay? Great.
Yes.
I know Cagatay, but the last name I think I needed more time to practice on. But anyways, he's a software engineer based out of Finland, right?
Yes, I live in Finland. I'm from Turkey, but I've been living in Finland for the last 11 years.
Mm-hmm. What initially attracted me to connect with you is your article, right? You did an article about Flutter performance, and I thought it was super interesting. Sadly, I didn't get to read through all of it. It's in 3 parts. I got through half of the first part, and I thought it was very detailed and helped me to understand a lot more. And I love the fact that you also linked to some videos from the Flutter team to kind of give more explanation. So I thought everything's put together perfectly. But why don't we talk a little bit more about who you are, right? So you're Turkish, but you're living in Finland. What happened?
Yes. Well, I'm from Turkey. I graduated from university and then I moved to Finland for my master's studies. And then I really loved Finland. And Finland is really you could see it's ranked first in many these welfare listings, the country. So I'm quite happy here. Like Finland, when you say Finland, the first thing comes to my mind is balance of work and life. So it is really important for me. I know that I can make maybe more money in States or in other countries, but I'm not sure if I could be this happy because I'm in Finland. There's amazing nature here. I love running. I love being in the forest. And summer is good. Winter is difficult, but it makes you more productive. Actually, I started writing this series in December and published in March. So it's 4 months of work. And it has a long story. Maybe we will come to that, or I can explain now. It's up to you. Or I can first introduce myself more detailed.
Yeah, why don't we talk more about your detail? And I think we have a fan of yours in the audience. I don't know. He's asking if everything's a widget, which Levent,
I don't know.
Levent, Levent.
Okay. Yes.
Is he a friend of yours?
Yeah, actually, I'm quite also active in Flutter community. I'm in the this admin group of this Flutter Turkey. And every week on Tuesday, we do Twitter spaces in Turkish. And we have great friends, great community. And it's great to be with these amazing people of Flutter community. And Twitter is also a good medium for making friends. And also I shared this on Twitter. And actually with Levent, who just commented, yesterday we made a Twitter spaces together, and it was a run-through for this podcast. I just wanted to be more prepared because I really value what you are doing here. It's really important. I have more articles than this one. I've been giving speech writing articles, but podcasts are really important for my learning. And when I'm running in the forest in Finland, you try to listen to podcasts, and I learn from other people. I learn how to put the ideas into words, and I also know some of them from Twitter, or also some of them personally, the people you are having. So learning from them, the way they put their ideas and their learnings into words are really useful.
You think the podcasts are so important? I don't know. I feel like, as I say, I feel like, I guess it depends on what you like to listen to, right? Or what you like to do, right? So when you're writing, when you're blogging, right, that's much more easy to be found because it's hard to search for voices in audio, right? But when you're looking, I mean, you just Google search, right? You can find whatever you need.
Maybe I'm different because when I'm running, I'm really enjoying the nature, but also I'm enjoying Flutter, and I'm some people listen to music. I listen to music while coding, while doing some other things. But when I'm running, I enjoy more podcasts. And I have 1 hour to run, and your show is exactly 1 hour, so it fits quite well.
Yeah. I guess it depends on the guest. Sometimes longer. I think we had a 2 or 3 hour episode one time. I don't know if you
Yeah, I
listened to
think
that one
Dart
over 3
one.
runs, maybe.
Yes, the Dart one was a bit more.
Should be Birth of Dart or Dart 101,
Yes,
something like that. Yeah,
yes.
that was very long, but that was a good one. I think that was a good episode.
And another one, the one I really liked was with Felix Block, because Block is your favorite state management. So, yeah.
Oh, now I feel like you're a personal fan of mine that you remember that.
Yeah, when you sent me this invite, I was really like hyped, and I was like, wow. I don't know, because I've been listening to those episodes like and never imagined that you could be one of those excellent people that talk, and I don't know. It's a good feeling being recognized, or like, yeah, I'm happy that you liked also the articles that I shared, because I really I spent quite a long time to put the words in the like a readable way, in the attractive way, because Flutter community does amazing job, not only Flutter developers. Flutter website is amazing source of knowledge, like there are many things that you can find put very nicely, but also we have great people, talented people who produce content, and then learning from them and bringing the things that I learned from different resources into one was a long work. And I like, for example, Adam Barth, who actually has the first commit to the Flutter project. Adam Barth has this talk with Tim Snead on this podcast named .NET Rocks, something like that. So he was talking about in the first days of Flutter, when Tim Snead actually joined from Microsoft to Google. So they were both very excited about explaining to Flutter, and then they really talked about the basics that I used in my articles, in a way that the motivation behind of these articles were like, if you want to convince your friend to use Flutter, how would you do that? How would you prove Flutter is a good choice? And this was main motivation. And then I was listening to Adam Barth and this other really amazing these content producers, really useful content, and it makes my job easier.
You said Adam Barth, B-A-R-T?
Yes.
Is that how to find him?
Yes, Adam Barth.
Okay,
you should have him in, but he's now actually not doing Flutter. He is now in the Fuchsia project. And when I heard that he is now in this Fuchsia project, I was very happy, because he did amazing job with Flutter. And I'm sure he will do great job also. He is doing great job probably also in Fuchsia project.
Okay, I just did a Google search, but I couldn't find him. A-D-A-M, right? Adam, and then Barth, B-A-R-T?
A-D-A-M, yes, B-A-R-T. But if you type YouTube rendering pipeline, you will see the first person there, Adam Barth, speaking. It was from early days of Flutter.
Okay, I found him. It's Barth, B-A-R-T-H.
Yes, exactly.
So
yes.
I found him. Okay. I'm looking for Barth, B-A-R-T, but I found him.
Okay.
Okay. Actually, I just talked to somebody from Fuchsia team for another podcast I'm doing last week, and they're talking about all the use of Rust that they've been using, which is quite interesting.
Yeah.
But I do like the fact that you can use Flutter to make your apps, and then Fuchsia already supports Flutter out of the box. So I'm not sure who got the idea to do that, but it's quite interesting that whenever Fuchsia does come out for more devices that we're basically ready to go, we could just port our app out.
Yes. And I don't know how to actually pronounce that. Fuchsia, I don't know.
It should be called Fuchsia, from what I've heard.
Okay.
Fuchsia, I believe.
Yes.
It's like a color or flower or something. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I forgot to ask.
As a Flutter developer, it is really, really exciting project for me. So let's see how it's going to evolve. But knowing that Adam Barth is behind it is a good feeling.
Well, what do you find so exciting about Fuchsia, though, for a Flutter developer?
Because you can write applications for an operating system that works in many devices. Like, I don't know if you followed how Huawei does HarmonyOS. It's almost similar. Like, you have one app that works in, it's actually what Flutter does currently, but the operating system that works pretty well with is the Fuchsia, will be with Flutter. So that is the exciting part.
For HarmonyOS, I've always heard that Harmony is basically just like a somewhat similar version of Android, but I haven't looked too much at it.
But in general, Huawei is a similar version of Android. I worked at Huawei as a developer support engineer once, long ago. So it is very, very similar, like very similar in general.
Seems you have a lot of fans coming to the chat right now. It's quite interesting.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know how you say this, Dilara,
Dilara is my wife, actually.
Oh, well, she sent a red heart, so she doesn't know you should be using blue heart, I guess.
Yeah, she's a designer, not a developer.
She outed herself. And then Eunice, UNUS.
Yeah, we work together.
So they also said hello.
He recently joined our Flutter team at Wolt.
It makes sense because he sent 2 blue hearts. So
yes.
That means he must be Flutter.
Yes. It's amazing to be in the community so that when you share your knowledge, there are people who are excited about it.
I think when you share some of this deep down knowledge about the way the widget tree works, you'll find people who are interested. But it depends, right? Because not everybody's really interested in that. They're mostly interested, how can I build, a Flutter app? How can I do this one feature? I think that's a huge amount of people, but I think the amount of people that really want to know, how does the rendering tree work and how does the widget tree work and element tree, it's very far and few. But the ones who do want to know that, and if you can explain it to them, they're going to love you for it, right? Because that's something that's not easy to understand.
Yeah, I had 3 articles. In the first one, I talked about the Sublinear build phase, where I explained this mahogany staircase, 3 trees of Flutter. And then in the second one, I talked about layered architecture of Flutter. And in the last one, I talked about this rendering pipeline. And also I mentioned how Flutter is compared to native Android development, because I have Android development background too. And also compared to React Native as well. So all in all, the main purpose was convincing people to use Flutter, because we have an interesting story, because at Wolt, we have 35 cross-functional autonomous teams, and each team is like a mini startup, and they have their own resources. So they know the problems that they are solving best. So they choose the platform and technology that they want to use. So our team, for example, is using Flutter, but we have, for example, different teams using React Native and native development. We have these progressive web apps, different technologies. Each team has different technology. And then I'm trying to convince people internally that Flutter is good. Try it. And they are listening. So let's see. When we have new projects, maybe we will have it with Flutter too.
Yeah, I mean, I really have a hard time to figure out why not to use Flutter, even if it's only for one platform. I just feel it's just such an awesome thing. And the UI you can make is really, really beautiful and works great.
Yes, actually, it depends on the business, because I don't know, you are in States, right? If I'm not wrong, are you? Where are you? In which country are you?
I'm from US. But I'm living in Hong Kong.
Oh, okay. So you haven't heard Wolt probably before?
What's it called?
The company that I'm working in. Wolt, W-O-L-T.
W-O-L-T. No, I don't think I have.
Okay. It's probably mainly active in Europe, in 23 countries, but mainly Europe. So what we are, like, Wolt is a technology company, but when we say Wolt in these countries, people think it like a grocery delivery company, food delivery company, but it's a technology company. And each team at Wolt are solving different problems. So solving problems of customers who are ordering, couriers who are bringing food to the customers, and then apps for merchants who are picking and packing. And for example, couriers team is using React Native for their app to solve that specific problem. And for this customer-facing app is a native app. And our app, which we use for picking and packing the orders, helping these merchants. So it's done with Flutter, just because our team decided to use Flutter. And why people are doing that? Because they know the business better. And for example, this food delivery and this delivery business is really like a hot business, like there's so much competition, and you should really not break things. And if you already have working native app, then continue with that. But if you are starting a new project, then if it is B2B, then I think the best option is going with cross-platform. And among cross-platform solutions, I think Flutter is the best.
It's interesting that you say that, actually, because I do have a client who we don't we don't do their mobile app. We did some of their APIs, and we helped them to do their website design. But they do run into a lot of issues with iOS and SwiftUI. And he's mentioned, one of the guys mentioned to me, hey, I wish we would have went with Flutter, but it's just not something that we could do because there's Swift.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say SwiftUI just seems to be a big problem at this time. It seems like it's still not ready yet.
Yes, the thing is that Flutter and this declarative paradigm started much earlier than SwiftUI and Jetpack Compose started. So I think they are trying to be like Flutter in a declarative way. Maybe native developers don't like what I say now, but for example, let's talk about React Native. React Native has this bridge, for example. It's not directly talking to GPU. It's still using the operating system's views, like UI libraries. But now they just, I think, announced the stable version of this new architecture. So they will also directly talk to GPU instead of talking to platform libraries. They will remove the bridge and they will directly talk with these C++ libraries in React Native. So they are also trying to be like Flutter. So I think this is proven to be the correct approach when building UI.
Yeah, which is definitely interesting. Yeah, I feel like Flutter definitely has caused people to kind of take another look at doing this kind of methodology. Yeah. But do you know how Jetpack Compose works as opposed to Flutter or no? Because I know you did with Android before.
This was also something that I promised myself to look before, but just before I quitted Android and started doing Flutter, Jetpack Compose was in pre-release. So I was trying to do it Android Studio. My machine was dying because at that time it was all like this compilation behind. Maybe from the audience they know. I just want to know about Jetpack Compose that is it using platform libraries? For example, is it using the button or is it also drawing like how Flutter is drawing pixel? In my articles, I also mentioned that Flutter has this pixel-driven architecture. So Flutter just draws pixels. It doesn't care about what platforms have what components, UI components. And this is also a big advantage because the quality and stability of these UI components are independent of platforms, underlying platforms. Let's talk about Android APIs, for example. Many devices, Android devices, are lacking updating the latest version. And for example, at Wolt, for example, we have our own design language. We don't really take too much from what is available in the underlying platforms. Of course, we want to give this feeling, but we have our own design language, so we don't have to look like Material or this Cupertino style. So what I mean is that these UI components should look the same for both. I mean, not look only, but behave. So the risk is also less because the stability is not dependent on too many different operating systems. API level of the operating system.
So you guys have your own bunch of widgets that you guys use to create your app. Is that what I heard?
Yes. So we have so many mobile applications at Wolt, and they all look the same. We have design language, and the company is really trying hard to be one of the best design companies in the world. So that's why we have our own. So we have a different repo where we keep our common UI components, and then we have currently only one Flutter Hub app. Hopefully we will have more. And then when we have a different Flutter app, we will use our own repository to get the components.
Okay, yeah, I understand that. But actually, do you mind to kind of talk a little bit about your past, right? So I want to hear more about so before that, were you always an Android developer or were you doing something before that?
Okay, so I have a bachelor's degree in telecommunications engineering, bachelor's and master's. I came to Finland because of Nokia. Nokia is legendary in 2010. It was dying at that time, but anyway. I'm a telecommunications engineer, and then I realized when I was studying, I wanted to be really closer to the end users. I wanted to do mobile applications that touches to users. That's why I decided to more work on Bluetooth. And then I did my master thesis on Bluetooth applications. There was one case that the mobile phone unlocks the doors that are controlled with Bluetooth Low Energy. And then I started to work more on mobile applications. I found a job for the same topic, unlocking doors with mobile phone. And then I started to work in a sports company. I stayed there for 4 years. For the first 2 years, maybe a bit more, I did mobile application development with Android. And then I joined Wear OS team. We did Wear OS applications. And I really worked closely with Google and Mapbox. I was responsible of putting map to a watch. I also have a side project which is a watch face application. And then at some point, I really love working like building something by myself. That's why I thought maybe I should learn iOS too, not only Android. And then maybe there is another way I can do cross-platform development for my ideas. Then I found a job with Flutter. I had no idea about Flutter. I really wanted to learn. They gave me the job with good salary. And then when I started the project, we started writing the project from scratch for mobile and web. I had to do responsive design, and it was a great way of learning. But working in a startup company is always difficult. So there were difficulties. And after some time, I joined Wolt, which is much more established company, but which was also another startup. But now it's much more established and everything is working fine. So I was first hired as an Android developer, but then the Flutter project became really important from business point. So then I decided I joined this Flutter team and doing full-time Flutter.
Full-time Flutter. Okay. Are you happy that you're doing this? I mean, do you think we made the right choice?
Of course. I mean, that the reason why I don't want to the reason why I'm trying to influence people in our company is that I want to do Flutter, and I really like working in this current company. I just don't want to come to that point that, okay, there is no Flutter or I am leaving. So I believe in Flutter, and I hope there will be more people believing in that, and we will keep doing it. But I don't need to do anything because it's already proven in our company that Flutter is stable and the correct choice for the business.
Has there been any benefits that you guys created this app in Flutter? Was it like fast to market or more responsive, less bugs? Has there any outcomes that you guys can compare your work compared to the other pieces in the company?
Yes, let's compare with native, for example. I think the most happy people in this case is the analytics team, because when you have different native teams, like there's this iOS code base and Android code base, and as an analytics, you analyze the behavior. Then you tell two teams that what needs to be gathered information from the user. So in this case, there are two different implementations, and one might be wrong. But when you have one code base, you get the correct analytics data from one code base, from iOS and Android. So one is this. Another one is that building actually UI is quite fast. At Wolt, motion design and UX is really important, and I'm enjoying a lot doing these motion animations. Actually, I had a talk at Flutter Vikings conference, and the talk was about adding motion to Flutter. So our motion designers are challenging us, and challenge is accepted. And thanks to Flutter, it is really easy to implement it, and it's fun as well. I'm saying this because I did the same things with Android too. I hated working with XML files. There's this motion libraries that with Android you still write with XML. The difference in Flutter is that in Android, you have Java and XML. If you're not using Jetpack Compose, of course, Kotlin or Java and XML. And then in Flutter, your markup is only Dart. You write only code. You don't have anything else. You describe to the framework what you want to see on the screen with coding. Nothing else is involved. And this is the best part, and it makes really easy and fast. And hot reload, of course. Hot reload is the best thing, because there was time in the company I was doing Android and Flutter at the same time. It was really difficult to not having hot reload and trying to develop after getting used to it.
There's still no kind of hot code reload for Android or iOS right now. Do you know?
Well, you need to build it if you want to deploy, of course. You need to build the APK, and building takes a lot of time. And in Flutter, hot reload is just like state, we update the state of the app. And this is something that Adam Bart also, I really like how he described this. Because the way Flutter works is that as an application developer, your only responsibility is in the build phase. So by build, we mean that composing the widgets in a tree. And then, thanks to this, Flutter framework takes care of all other dirty work, handling this dirty management, dirty screen management, like updating elements, render objects. And thanks to this, hot reload works almost like a perfect, because you still change the widget tree, and then you say hot reload. Again, the same thing happens, like the same thing is run behind. So all the widgets tree is updated. So this kind of separation helps this hot reload.
Well, maybe this brings us back to kind of the main topic, right? Which is about the Flutter performance, right?
Yes.
Do you mind if we can kind of go over your different articles that you wrote? So part one was really talking about, if I understand correctly, it was talking about the trees, right, and how they work.
And the sublinear.
Do you mind to kind of describe the sublinear? Yeah, well, let's talk about that, right? Do you mind to kind of give a breakdown of the first part?
Yes. So the title of these articles actually is Why Flutter is Fast, and it's about performance. And to do things right in a performant way, we really need to understand how the framework works. Otherwise, we can compose widgets. They work somehow, but in the performance, because there are some widgets that are really expensive to use. And then you need to really think about like performance and how can you make it performant. And then there is one specific method in Flutter framework, which is also stated in the documentation, that it is the fundamental thing in the Flutter, which is update child of an element. So understanding when is element reused, when is element is removed and a new one is created, or when is the build phase is stopped, is the main thing. If you understand that part, then you have a good understanding. But if I ask you, Flutter is a UI toolkit, right? When I ask about like what is performance, can you describe the performance of a UI toolkit? How would you describe it? Like what would be, for example, the metric?
I don't even know how to answer that kind of question. I don't know how to answer that kind of question. What is the platform of a UI framework? I don't even know how to answer that kind of question.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. But I would say that, for example, for me, the performance, if Flutter is performant, because people are asking me, how is Flutter performant compared to native? I'm saying like, check this FPS, frame per second, because it is all about drawing frames on the screen in the end, right? And in the early days of development, mobile development, it was all focused about draw it as fast as possible so that human eye doesn't notice it. Otherwise, it is janky. So the first thing is that how fast can you do all the rendering of one frame so that you can have 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second, depending on the GPU or device performance. But nowadays, devices are really strong. So the focus, we can get this even like without really taking care of too much details about this, reusing the widgets or somehow. But also there is another things to consider nowadays because we already have these powerful devices. For example, the resources that device is using. So is the device using too many resources when drawing? Because when we have the Flutter app, it's not only drawing UI, we have network requests, we have background tasks. So how much resources is your app using in the device? Another thing to consider is that the animations, because in animations, you update the screen in milliseconds level. So it needs to be fast when you are drawing frame. For example, React Native is having this kind of difficulties when scrolling and then with these animations. But Flutter, it needs to be fast when drawing a frame. Another thing is that how much is the CPU working when doing these computations, like layout computation, because calculating layout is a computation and painting is a computation. And how many times is the tree, the widget tree or render tree is traversed when you are when the framework is computing the layout? For example, in Android native development, the layout when it is doing the layout phase, it is traversing 2 times the widget tree, but Flutter does it one pass. Layout is done one pass and build is done in one pass. And this is the main advantage of Flutter. And in my articles, I started with widget element and render object because people are focused on widget and everything is widget. We say that because Flutter framework encourages us not to use render objects. You can do everything with Flutter widgets. So even if you think that you really need to use render object, think about again, because we have some widgets in the widgets library, like single child widget and multi-child layout widget or flow widget, which help you to do some add code in this layout and paint phases of the rendering pipeline. But let's go back to these three trees again. As I mentioned in my articles, Flutter has more than 3 trees. Widget tree, element tree, and render tree that every developer, I believe, should know. Of course, there are different trees as well. For example, focus tree is a tree. Like there's the semantics tree, and then there is this layer tree, which is submitted to the Flutter engine. But the most important thing is widget tree, element tree, and render tree. Since as application developer, our responsibility is composing widgets, we really need to know widget tree. And then there is this element tree. Widgets are just configurations. It's empty, like it's just like a JSON you describe. It doesn't know its parents, doesn't know its descendants, it doesn't know the location in the widget tree. But elements know it. And render objects know how to do layout, how to do positioning, how to do paint and hit testing, accessibility. All the information is there. What you see in the screen, you might think that it's widget, but it is not widget. Widget is just like an empty JSON file. Like you send the JSON file through like backend communication and things are done in your, locally. But anyway, let's continue. The second thing is element. Because many Flutter developers think that they don't know element, they are not using element. And I highlighted this in my article that they are using element because build context is element. And I also added that there are some packages that are not really trying to get rid of context, because it's always like when you work with context, you can make mistakes or exceptions. So I think context is really important to know because it's the only way that you know the size of the widget. It's the only way of getting the location of the widget in the widget tree. For example, we have a scaffold of context, navigator of context. What it does, it finds the first ancestor of navigator, first ancestor of scaffold. Another thing, change notifier provider or block provider, we find the first block and first provider of the widget using context of the widget, element of the widget, because only element knows the position in the tree. So I feel like element is like Google Maps. When you're in a town, you don't know anything, you are a widget. And then you have your Google Maps, which element, which tells you what is around you. It's important. And then there is render object, which is responsible of this kind of computations, like where to put your widget. You provide the list of children, but you tell them somehow with the widget description. But in the end, the last thing is set by render object. You really believe that you placed it correctly in the widget tree, but render object puts it somewhere else because there are these rules. And then you may want to customize these rules. Then you may think first, okay, I will write my own render object. I don't like this widget and its own render object. I will write my own. You can do this, but it's always risky because it is a bit low level and you might make mistakes. You might have performance issues. Flutter widgets library has some kind of widgets, single child layout, multi-child layout, flow widget. These can help you to do things that render objects do using widgets and their delegates. Yeah, this was the main thing. Another thing in that article was I wanted to show that build, how is this build done? So it's single pass, the most important thing, and it happens from top to down. It's the most important thing to know. Layout phase and build phase, they are done from top to down. And then the parent elements check their children to add, remove or update a new element for that frame. And Flutter framework does an amazing job of abstracting it in a way that it tries to reuse as much as possible so that we can build a new widget tree, from that widget tree for that frame, we can update or reuse existing element and render objects as much as possible, because widget is not expensive. You can create widgets in every build, but creating elements and render objects which do the heavy job, it's expensive, and the way to avoid that is understanding how this framework works. This was the first article.
Yeah, the part that was always, the part that was kind of a little bit confusing to me is like how, because every time that your app runs through and it creates those configuration widgets, as you call it, I'm always kind of curious about how does it like relate back and forth, like, because like obviously if you change the key, that's a new widget, then that probably may need a new render object, right? Or sorry, it may need a new like element.
Yes. And in my first article, I really highlighted the importance of using the const widgets, constants, and then catching the widget if needed. Because in many times, devices are strong enough, capable enough of drawing the frames fast, but there are some widgets that Flutter doesn't do a great job to draw. For example, backdrop or some jobs that require more painting stuff. Then you may need to do some performance work. Then you can catch that widget so that widget is not created, because when a widget is created, it's inflated, an element is created. So, but again, we are providing another set of widgets. If the runtime type and the key is the same, the element is updated. But there is one thing that you can do. You can catch or use constant widget, which is created in compile time, the constant ones. So that Flutter framework first checks if they are the same instance. Because if they are the same instance, there is no need to update the element, because updating the element causes a build. First, we can do that. We can use the same widget, same instance. We can catch it or use constant widgets. If we can't do this, this is very possible because we are many times providing size depending on the screen size, or we are many times localizing strings. It is not defined in compile time. So then we can update the widget. But for example, if you provide a different key, or if the widget runtime type is different for that location in the tree, then we are not reusing the element, we are not reusing the render object, we need to create new ones, which is not good in terms of performance. And this is actually the main idea, entire idea, reuse as much as possible, because framework wants you to do that.
Well, there's always, when you have one widget, does that mean there's always going to be one element inside the element tree that goes like
every
a one-to-one
widget
match? Okay.
Yes. There is this widget tree and then there is element tree. For every widget, there is a corresponding element, but not render object. It's not the same for render object. For example, stateless.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to ask you next. I don't think there's the same thing for that, because it would make sense to have a render object for like a provider widget or inherited widget, right? Where you're just holding on to state.
Yes, because these stateless objects, stateful objects, they are actually extending component element. And there is also this render element, render object element. So the component element, what it does, when we have this stateless widget, we provide a subtree, right? The responsibility of this component elements is having these subtree, which has their own render objects, render tree, subtree.
Okay.
Inherited widget, for example, doesn't have render object neither.
Yeah. So not every widget will have a render object, but every widget will always have an element tree.
Yes.
Or sorry, an element.
Because
call that just an element?
Element tree, yes. Because without an element, widget doesn't know where it is in the tree. And actually, again, let's repeat, element is build context. Because many developers don't know what element is, how they use it. It is provided by you to the framework, through the framework when you build. Yeah, also it's in the state.
Yeah, I think that's the most surprising part. I think a lot of people don't know that. I kind of either forgot that, like it sounds kind of familiar, but I was definitely surprised when I watched the video that you linked to it, and I was like, oh, interesting.
Yeah, Andre, he has amazing videos, like short, but really to the point. And in the three of those articles, I have many videos from him.
Yeah, his videos are great. His videos are fantastic.
Yes, in the first one, there's another thing is that polluting. I really want to mention polluting, because dirty region management is really important, and it is not an easy task for Flutter, for example. Like there are some widgets that are hard to calculate this dirty region. For example, backdrop filter and like opacity. So what we are doing is that I just want to read one thing from the documentation I really like. It's also in the references of this first article. Dirty region, a portion of an app where widgets and components are different in one frame as compared to the previous frames that have been displayed. So if you want to update a portion of the screen, we pollute it, and it's called dirty widget. And there are limited number of ways that you can make a widget dirty. One of them is known like a set state, which is like very famous. And for example, when you do hot reload, you also pollute the app. And another thing is that when you do this state management with this inherited, did change dependencies. So mark needs build. This is the main thing, like dirty making. If you want to update a UI, pollute the subtree, and then it will be updated. And I mentioned the places where you can do it and how you can do it. This is the story of the first article. Oh, one more thing about the first article, which I really think it's important, state object, because state and stateful widget. I just want to mention that state is permanently associated with an element. So we have widget has an element. If the widget is stateful widget also has a state object, which element has reference to, because element has reference to widget, element has reference to state if it is stateful widget, and also to the render object. So element is kind of an information hub.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the story of the first article. And the second one is really interesting, in my opinion.
Okay, yeah, let's go on to the second article.
Okay, let's go on to the second one. In the second one, I talked about the layered architecture, because in Flutter, you can actually customize in every part of the this architecture. We have widget tree, we have element tree, and render tree. You can reuse widget trees and then add your own implementation of render tree, for example, how you handle the rendering. Or like the parts are really interchangeable and replaceable. So the second part starts with the difference of React Native and Flutter and native development. I just want to highlight that Flutter is pixel driven from top to the down, like everything is in the control of Flutter framework, because it is shipped with Skia in the engine, which is very like it's proven to work. It has Chrome uses it, Mozilla uses it. There are really like different platforms uses Skia. It's responsible of 2D rendering, 2D rendering. And also interesting thing is that there's this text library. You draw text fonts, for example. It's also reused from Android operating system. So the thing is that when you are using Flutter, you are not really dependent on how this 2D is drawn, how fonts are drawn, because Flutter APKs are shipped with these things. So for example, another interesting thing is that Flutter uses AOSP, Android Open Source Project's text library, and it's shipped to iOS. So if you have a Flutter app in iOS, you're actually showing the fonts in a way that is done in Android. It's interesting. But if you are doing native development or React Native development, you are using the system libraries that are talking to C++, using C++, talking to lower layers and drawing things. But Flutter is responsible of drawing alone, thanks to the engine and this layered architecture. But one thing I would like to also highlight is that React Native is also changing, because in this second article, there is this bridge that is translating your JavaScript to the platform libraries, and then platform libraries talk to GPU. But now, in 2018, React Native changed the architecture. After 4 years, it is stable. Now, the JavaScript directly talks to C++ libraries using JSE. Android, when you do native development, you have JNI, Java Native Interface. And then there's the JavaScript interface, which with React Native, it took 4 years to get it stable. Maybe it will take another 4 years to get it in the package and to the community everywhere to get used. So the good thing is that Flutter eliminates one level of abstraction. This was the first point with the architecture. And in the rest of the article, we talked this Windows support, iOS support, web support, and how it is done. Actually, I wanted to highlight this embedder layer because Flutter, when there is new version or Flutter SDK comes with its own embedders. Like we have Android folder, iOS folder. If you support Windows, Linux, or Mac OS, Android SDK comes with these embedders. But for example, we have different embedders, the different operating systems, such as embedded Linux, such as Tizen from Samsung. I don't know how it is read. Or, Toyota is doing that, for example. It's if you want to support a different platform, you can easily reuse the widgets layer, framework layer, and the engine layer, and add your own embedder, which is responsible of communication with the underlying operating system. And lastly, I highlighted why web is different than other platforms. Yeah, this gives the overall architecture.
Yeah, maybe you could talk about that because we do have a question in the audience. I don't know if you can answer this one, which is there any work going on for improving performance in the context of Flutter Web? Maybe this is a good way to kind of answer the question about why is Flutter Web not so performant compared to the more native experiences?
Mm-hmm. So I have another article series about building a single-page scrollable website with Navigator 2 API. So in there, I have open source demo project as well with Flutter Web. So I had a chance to work with Flutter Web and investigated it. So we know that Dart is actually started as a project. You had also guessed about that. It's for JavaScript. The easiest thing that can be done with Dart is that compiling it to JavaScript. But web is different because you have mobile applications in phone or Windows, in Mac. They can communicate with the operating system. But web application is sandboxed in web browser. So, for example, that's why you can't use Dart.io in web project. That's why we have K is web. Because Dart.io communicates with the operating system, the library, and Flutter Web doesn't have access to that, cannot do that. So it's sandboxed application in web. And Flutter team focuses on improving the performance on application point. So it is suggested to do Flutter Web applications for Flutter Web, use Flutter Web for single page applications, porting your mobile application to web experience. And this is actually the main thing. It is not really made for static content. Another thing is that it's Flutter Web's nature. As I said, it cannot communicate with the operating system, but Flutter engine layer is written with C++ to communicate with the operating system, right? But Flutter Web cannot do that, so that's why it is the re-implementation of this engine layer done with C++, for example, for Skia, for writing fonts, but it's using standard browser APIs instead. So it's a different approach. And if you check the 2022 roadmap of Flutter for web, it mainly talks about the performance improvements. It doesn't talk about for example, SEO support, SEO support, metadata support. So when you have a website, you want to add this meta support and this search engine optimization. Currently, Flutter doesn't support these things because they're only focusing on improving the performance for websites that are actually an application, and it's constant work. It's going on, and we are not doing web at my current job, so I have only my limited time to work with web. This is what I learned, so maybe you will have better guests that can say more about these things.
Yeah, we've only had one guest, but she was more on the PM side. I don't think it's Hassani, I think is her name.
Mm-hmm.
So she couldn't give too much information about that. But yeah, I would love to talk about how the web part works because it's the most different, right? It's very different compared to the native.
Yes.
So, and actually, I'm kind of curious to see if with the way the browser's going, I mean, the browser is basically almost like a sandbox OS nearly, right? Because you can have a USB, you can have Bluetooth, you can have so many different things. And now you can actually run applications straight with WebAssembly. So I don't know if this makes Flutter Web more possible, like where you can basically take, I mean, I know C++ can compile to WebAssembly, so maybe it is possible that we can rewrite the engine so that it does get compiled into there or something. I don't know. I'm kind of curious to see what's going on and what they're looking at.
I never had web development experience other than this interest on this article. So I'm also interested. I hope one day I will have this experience that I have a project that also works on web. But as I said, I had a short time in a startup. We had web support. It did the job. I don't know, like it's not that bad. It still does the job. We had so big lists that you could scroll. I mean, depends on like you, of course, if you rely on web, if you want a good web experience, do it with React or Vue.js. But if you want to reuse the code, if you want to support, of course, there is these like good things and bad things. And in our project, it was okay because it was a B2B application. But for projects like in our company, current company, Wolt, we really like obsessive with user experience, customer user experience, and then this smooth animations and everything. So then I would be a bit hesitant to use Flutter Web, porting our website to Flutter Web.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of people out there who think that maybe this Flutter Web was a little bit pushed too quickly because of the performance problems. But I mean, the one thing that still blows my mind is how can you not have, I understand that's difficult, but how can you say this is production ready without the hot code upgrade or hot code ability, right? It's like, that's one of the key pillars of Flutter, right? I don't call it Flutter without the hot code upgrade.
Yeah, and another thing is that actually like as Dart started to replace JavaScript, and it is really easy to do Dart to JS, compile the Dart code to JavaScript. Another thing I really wonder, for example, now in a side project that I'm working on, I use Cloud Functions for Firebase. It is still with JavaScript. I know that Dart can easily be compiled to that. Why it is not there? But there was another Q&A hump day from this Flutter community that was a guest saying that they are working on it. And I think this year, it will be the year for more like a Dart and Dart servers, actually. Full stack Dart. I'm expecting a better support in that.
Yeah, that would be interesting if you can write your Cloud Functions in Dart.
I'm sure it's coming soon.
Why not?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, because it can compile, it can transpile to JavaScript, so why not?
But
and
I understand
also, I don't see why they cannot just support it out of the box.
I understand the team, right? Actually, Flutter team, because you are doing cross-platform and you are trying to make everyone happy. First, you need to make mobile developers happy because they are dominating the market. And then you do the web developers happy. And then you do Windows developers happy before the Linux developers happy. Of course, there are geeks that please bring more support. But there are more Windows developers. There is more demand. And they have a team at Flutter. So they try to solve many different problems. And if you go not that far, if you go 1 year before or 2 years or something, the Metal support for iOS just came. I mean, for drawing just recently in 2.17 something. Sorry, 1.7. Even before 2.0, like they are trying to solve so many different problems. And focusing is, I mean, they have many resources, maybe not, because Google is a big company, right? But it's not about only resources. It's about focus. Focus is the most important thing. And in our company at Wolt, focus that we really say a lot because we can do many things, but we want to do things exceptionally good. Then you need to focus. Losing focus in different areas just to support web for example, static websites, then you lose focus. Maybe you lose supporting mobile, right? Because the core Flutter developers are doing mobile development.
Yeah, I have a feeling that they're trying to push this stuff more in enterprise. That's what I have a feeling about because Chris Sells used, if I remember correctly, he was doing a lot of the enterprise support and talking to a lot of companies and trying to push that through. And I think, you need to have that, right? Because if people aren't hiring for Flutter, then the people who are actually going to be using Flutter is going to be very low, right?
Yeah, actually,
And
I think
yeah,
the best case using Flutter for startups. If you have a startup company, start with Flutter. That's what I would say.
yeah,
And
definitely. Yeah.
and then Flutter Web. If your app, if you need a web app, use Flutter. You don't need to hire web developers because you don't have resources.
Yeah, and also with Serverpod, have you seen that recently?
That's the one I missed because my headphone headphone that I was using while running is broken, so I missed that one. It's the recent one, right? The last one, I think, or one before.
Well, a new one just came out today, so
okay.
it should be 2 episodes ago, I think. I can't remember now, but Serverpod is interesting because that's a full-on, like, full stack solution for Flutter and backend and everything with Dart. So that will be also interesting, right? That is a bigger thing. And he's currently working part-time at a company, and they're heavily invested into Flutter and Serverpod. So I think that, yeah, if you have the companies using this stuff, then that will kind of start the process of, making the egg for the chicken to hatch, and then so on and so forth.
It's not going to happen tomorrow. That's why I'm excited about Fuchsia. When we have more devices that run with, Fuchsia, you can write apps with Flutter. That will be actually maybe much easier for, spending resources on it because people are using it. But I mean, thinking about that, Flutter has done quite amazing job in such a short time. I think in the popularity lists, I think they are better than React Native from popularity point. It wasn't like that, I think, 1 year ago or something.
Yeah, I mean, there's always this idea that, Google may cut it or kill it, but it doesn't seem like that at all. But I understand the worry.
I think Google made an exceptional job to make developer happy with Flutter. I would like to say that why Flutter. I came from Android development. I loved Kotlin. It was expressive. Then I came to Dart. It was missing when I started doing Flutter. It was missing null safety. It is still missing sealed classes, data classes, unions. But I still love Dart. The main reason is that it's under control of Google. For Android and Kotlin is developed with JetBrains, and Android is Google. So they are different companies. But Google owns Dart. Google owns Flutter. Whenever there is a new Flutter update, if you check the Medium articles, they always talk about Dart update. So it is helping developers to be happy because they are not dependent on other entities to make developers happy. And actually, Flutter community is doing also exceptional job, and the developer relations also doing exceptional job. In my opinion.
My only concern about this is I wish that Dart can be more of a language by itself. Dart is a good language, as you said, and it can be used in many different places. I mean, the proof of that is just Flutter itself. It's used in so many different platforms. And with Serverpod, I mean, why can't it be used as a web framework? But the thing is now Dart, it comes out, like you said, it comes out the same when there's a new build of Flutter stable. Well, there's a new Dart stable that gets released, and I'm a little bit annoyed about that. Just not because I like new stuff, but I wish that they were more separate, right? That's my one concern. I don't really like, but I understand that it's 99% of people are using Flutter for Dart, and so we should just put them together. Okay, I understand that, but I wish they could start to kind of push it and show things, because the PDF library, I think, is really, really cool. And that's a Dart-only thing. I think there's a lot of really other cool Dart-only stuff that we could be using.
But I think it will happen. I mean, at least from the other podcasts and shows or resources that I follow, it is going to happen. I'm already surprised how fast they touched so many different areas. And actually, this is also with the help of community. For example, we have so many Navigator 2 solutions. We have so many state management solutions. It's coming from community. When I was doing Androids, the Jetpack libraries all the time were updated. You are trying to do something, for MVP, model view presenter or model view model, and then there is another Jetpack library comes. Okay, do this time this way. So it's hard to all the time update the code base to get the latest. But with Flutter community, it is not dependent on only what Flutter team suggests you. There are so many options available, and you can pick anything you want. And yeah, I think this brings more flexibility, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. For your part 2, is there anything else that we missed?
Nothing else.
Have we gone through all the pieces? Okay. Yeah, I know Skia is a huge thing, and Skia was just bought by Google a few years ago, right? So
no, I'm dubbed. I think it was 2011 or 10 something. I think it was 2005. Okay. It was. I can quickly check Wikipedia.
Yeah, because it was made by some startup, right? And then Google saw it was cool and then bought it. And then I think from there it was like quiet about what they were doing with it.
Actually, Google acquired in 2005. Yes, it was.
So a real long time ago.
Yes, and it is really available. It's used by many different platforms. Google Chrome, Chrome OS, Chromium, Mozilla Firefox, Thunderbird, Android, Firefox OS, LibreOffice, Flutter. Yeah. So also, as I said, like these are the already proven to work. So Flutter just took it.
Yeah. Is it still open source so anybody can still use it, right?
Yeah, it's open source. Yes. As far as I know.
Okay.
It should be.
Okay. Yeah, because I took ownership of it. I don't know if that means that they, put some caveats about when you use this, what you can use it for.
Yeah. But Chrome, for example, uses it. And actually, Adam Bart comes from Chrome team, if I'm not wrong. Actually, he has this rendering in web. He has this background. That's why Flutter looks more like, there is this padding, there is this margin and everything in this style. It resembles the web development somehow when you are defining UI.
Yeah, well, I do remember that Eric was on the Chrome team, right? I think we talked about this in the Dart 101 or the Birth of Dart podcast episode.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. Okay. Now for part 3, what was part 3 about? This is about the rendering pipeline.
Yes, rendering pipeline is really important, and it is nothing specific to Flutter. It's about drawing a frame. Every platform they have their own processes for drawing a frame, and it's a sequence of steps. Starts with build phase, continues with layout, and then painting. Then the layer 3 is created, and then it's submitted to the engine, and finally the instructions are sent to the operating system. So this is the summary of it. But there are more details that one should know if they want to efficiently build special components. Because as I said, building Flutter app is really easy, or modding Flutter is really easy, but doing cool stuff in a performant way requires knowledge about how layout is computed, how painting is done. For example, the main reason why I was obsessed with this, because I was trying to solve a problem that our motion designer asked us. We, at Wolt apps, in different courier apps, native apps, customer apps, we have scrollable bottom sheets, and they are multi-page. Solving a multi-page scrollable bottom sheet is a really difficult problem. I don't know, do you use Strava? Strava has...
Yeah.
You use Strava, right?
I downloaded Strava because one of my clients, we actually work with it for him. So I sometimes I open up the app because I have to work with the OAuth and stuff like that. So I'm familiar with the app.
Yes. So they have this bottom sheet. In this bottom sheet, the size changes, like it's like using bottom sheet with Strava is really difficult. If you go to Roots tab or if you open a bottom sheet, it is very difficult to... it's not comfortable as a user, I would say. It doesn't provide a good user experience because when the bottom sheet page content changes, the size should the size change should feel like it is very natural. So what I was trying to do, I was trying to add this pagination. So it is when you go to the next page, the page goes from right to left. And if the other page is longer than the previous page, then the bigger page gets smaller, the smaller page gets bigger, but all the time their size is equal so that it is very smooth. So being able to do this really requires understanding of how layout is computed and how painting is done. Because the layout phase, it's only geometry. It just does mathematics, calculations. It tells about the size. But then after the paint phase, you can see what is there. And then, the biggest challenge for me was this size transition, keeping it at the same level. The problem is that you can't know the size in the build phase. Like you can tell this widget will be this height, but in the end, it's Flutter decides, the render objects decides in the layout phase what size it will be. So getting the size of the larger widget so that you will set the size of the smaller widget. So it is really it was a really difficult problem. I open sourced this scrollable bottom sheet solution in my GitHub. Actually, my article was supposed to be this multi-page scrollable bottom sheet, and this 3 series was supposed to be one part of that article series. Then it became 3 series and separate series. So the next article that I already have written 2 of them is about multi-page bottom sheet. So in the end, if you want to build special components, understand how the layout works, understand at what stage you know the size, at what stage you can do transformations, for example, scale, or translation in Y, or translation in different transformation in different axes. So those things are really needed. But to summarize the rendering pipeline. So it starts with the build phase. In the build phase, our responsibility as developers provide the widget tree, compose a widget tree. And then after the build phase, by build, that all the elements are updated. And then after the build phase ended, the dirty widgets are not dirty anymore. Then the layout phase starts. And in that phase, we know the size of the widgets. So what happens is that the layout phase is one pass. It starts from top to down, and parent sends that, okay, these are your constraints, give me your size. So and then the widget gives the size, and then for the next child, it says, okay, these are your constraints, give me your size. And it goes like that. So after that, we have the paint. And then in that paint, we have these painters. So it's also like a really detailed topic. There is this repaint topic, which I personally really don't know in detail, but I didn't need to know. But at some point, maybe I will need to know. But what paint does in the end, that it just makes it visible. And then after the paint phase, there is the semantics, which is not really that important in that, but of course it's important for accessibility reasons. But it's important. Sorry, I take it back. And then after that, there is this layer tree. So we talked about widget tree, element tree, and render object tree, right? And then there is this layer tree, which developers don't need to know because it's very low level. It is produced as a result of this rendering pipeline. It is submitted to the engine, and then in the engine, composition and rasterizing happens, and then GPU instructions is set. The reason why I wanted to talk about this rendering pipeline, because at the end of the 3rd article, there is this full example, wrap up. So how does build phase works, and how each single child element is updated, and then how is layout calculated. Yeah, just full picture of the story of a frame, because it needs to be done in the 15 milliseconds to provide 60 FPS frame per second. So it needs to be fast. If it is not fast, then you need to revise what is going on, at what step you had a problem? Because people say that, okay, iOS app doesn't work well. I mean, Flutter is not fast. Maybe you did something wrong because we had a problem really in our long list. It was very difficult to scroll. Then I ran the app in Profiler. Have you ever run the app in Profiler mode? We have debug, release, and Profiler mode, right?
Yes, I have.
Yes. When you run the app in the Profiler mode, you can see this graph in your app, in the device. Like, it just tells you how long does it take to draw a frame. If it takes longer than 15, I always forget how many milliseconds does that make when it's 60 FPS. But anyway, if it takes more than this fixed 60 FPS limitation, then it gets red. So I realized that we were using one component which was doing custom painting, and then I removed it from there, and then it was again very smooth. The scrolling was really smooth. Yeah. So understanding rendering pipeline helps you to figure out what causing this latency.
Okay, if I did my math correctly, it should be about 16 or 17 milliseconds.
Yes, I know.
Okay. Yeah, I just did 1 divided by 60 times 1,000 will give me an idea. Okay.
And the reason why React Native is suffering, why React Native changed this approach, because it was taking so long time to send the JSON, and it's asynchronous. You send the JSON, you tell this configuration in JavaScript thread, and then the native side communicates you back. So this bridge is causing latency to run you smooth scrolling, smooth animation. Since Flutter is doing an amazing job on talking to from widgets library to the very bottom of in this layer, in this rendering pipeline, like it directly talks to GPU, the latency is low. And that's why React Native is also trying to eliminate the bridge and directly talk to GPU through GSI.
Okay, I see. Okay, yeah, I mean, I think your article is super clear, and I like that you give more like, watch this video, or here's a link to the docs that you can read and get more information. So
actually, there is really like the articles there. I really suggest, my articles is just the tip of this. And these articles, the references in those articles, I strongly suggest to read them, watch them. They are amazing. And this is how I learned it. Because another thing why I love Flutter, because reading the source code is super easy with Flutter. You can follow what is going on. The source code of Flutter is not targeting the Flutter developers only, the internal Flutter team. It is targeting everyone. So everyone can read and understand what is going on. I learned how this build owner in this rendering pipeline, and then pipeline owner takes care of these steps of rendering. Just reading from the source code. And then these videos, of course, helped me to understand more. And I tried to understand the same thing with Android, actually, because in the third article, I compared the layout mechanism between the layout phase between native Android and Flutter. It was so difficult for me to find a good resource in Android. So in Flutter community, we are lucky that we have so many great content.
I think we're lucky that we had such good documentation, really.
Exactly. Not only that, also Flutter community. Yeah. I also would like to add one more thing about this Flutter thing, because there are sometimes companies are hesitant about switching to Flutter just because they think they cannot find Flutter developers, right? But we opened a position, and in 1 week we had to close it because there were so many applications that we really don't have time to go through them. It wouldn't be fair. We didn't hire, but we had so many candidates. I think number of Flutter developers are really increasing, and it is definitely not a problem.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the fact that Flutter is so easily accessible and easily understandable, at least at a very high level, with just the widget tree itself, is both a blessing and a curse.
Yes.
And I think you understand why, right? Because not just about the amount of candidates, but the quality of candidates. I mean, when the pool is bigger, yes, the amount of people who are not that maybe as good as you really would like to have.
Yes.
Right.
And having a native background also helps. Today, I just fixed a problem just because I have an Android background.
Yeah, I definitely would say so. I think I'm also lucky that I did an iOS and an Android app because it does help me to understand like what I'm doing. Sometimes, sometimes it does. And actually, I find it very useful for fixing bugs in people's plugins, actually. I find a lot of really weird bugs in people's plugins because maybe they're not up to speed in native development.
But I really don't want to look like a gatekeeper as well. It is definitely not a must, but it is good to have this Android background.
I think no matter what, you're going to have to get into some at least because it's hard to do some more advanced things without writing some native code because Flutter can't do everything. You know, Flutter is limited by the ability of the packages, right? So if there's no packages, you have to make it.
But there are sometimes, because I'm active in this Flutter Turkey community, I answer so many questions as I have time. So there are so many questions sometimes coming from beginners. Should I first start with Android or native iOS and then jump to Flutter? It's not that like that. Like you learn things when you need it. So it doesn't make sense to understand everything about Android spending years just to do Flutter.
Yeah, totally agree on that one. It doesn't make sense to do that. You're just kind of giving yourself more headache, I think, because there's a lot of stuff in Android that will just mess you up. Like I think I heard like the list view in Android is very complicated to the way that Flutter does
view
it. And
is the nightmare.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've been
so
there.
That may just turn you off to mobile development in general if you went that route, right?
And working with XML files, I don't like it at all after doing declarative. Because as an Android developer, I was super happy because I was writing in XML, I was seeing in preview, because I didn't know there was another possibility. Then I started doing Flutter. I was like, what have I been doing?
Yeah, definitely.
That's why Jetpack Compose came.
Yeah, I think that people are catching on to what makes Flutter so good and so popular.
Yeah, and
so...
also Flutter is proven to work well. And now React Native is trying to have the same approach. Android, iOS is trying to have same approach with Jetpack Compose, SwiftUI. So if I was a developer, why would I try to learn something that is trying to look like Flutter, which is not stable enough? So I would go with Flutter. And this is my pitch at the company when I'm talking with the different teams.
So are you the guy in the office that people kind of stay away from because you just keep talking about Flutter all the time?
Yeah, I'm known as a Flutter guy. I remember once we were in a party, like this Christmas party, I approached to the Flutter React Native team lead just for fun. Like I was just going to say hi. No, she was like, no, we are not going to Flutter. We are staying with React Native. But of course, I understand because we have different teams and every team are the one that knows the business very well. They are the ones closer to the team, to the customer. So they know the problem. If they think that React Native is the solution, then that's a very good to go. But if there is a possibility to think again, maybe.
You'll be there, right?
Yes. And if there is a solution that is already working well, sometimes because Wolt is a really big company and we are active in 23 countries, and we have these native apps have really high scores in stores. So why would you change something that already works just to have it in Flutter? We have enough resources to do native development. It's very well done. So it is fixing the problem. But if we start something new, then I could jump in and I could show my articles that, okay, this is why Flutter is fast.
Yeah, I guess it depends on your company and what you guys value. It depends because, if you do have two different teams building the same app just for different platforms, you may get the apps that actually function quite differently, right? Which could then cost you some money in the support area. And so let's also say that, okay, you got 10 guys who do iOS, you got 10 guys who do Android, but then if you put them together, you can have 20 people to do both apps, right? You can get more stuff done, right? That's another way to also look at it too.
Yes, exactly. But as I said, if you have something that works, and also this food delivery and grocery delivery, in general, this logistic platform is very hot, competitive. So there is no luxury of taking a risk in this case, like if it is facing the customer. In B2B, you can be more relaxed because you can tell to your business partners that, okay, update to this version, it fixes this. But for customers, if they are ordering and if they see a bug, okay, I'm switching to other one because I have many options. So it's about taking risks.
Yeah, this is true. Some things are not worth the risk, especially like you said, if it's very competitive, it's better not to. If it's working, don't fix it, right?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, thank you for taking the time to talk about your articles, and for sure I'll be making some time to go through them and actually really get into them. So I definitely appreciate your articles. We may have you back on to talk about more of your articles because you have more articles and more things you're working on, right?
Yeah. Thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me. As I said, I'm fan of your show. So I was super hyped when I got the invite. And then about my other articles, my first main article was switching between dark theme and light theme using provider. But that was just the beginning of my writing. I think I had better job in this explaining Navigator 2. So my big first hit was Navigator 2, which already has 20,000 reads on Medium. So I talk about how Navigator 2, without any package, works on mobile and web, because Navigator 2 is very complex topics to explain. And at that time when Navigator 2 was introduced, there was no resource that could be like that was good enough to do that. So I just spent really long time on understanding the source code and issues on GitHub to understand how it works, because I personally believe that Navigator 2 is very underrated and hated. I don't understand that. It is so beautiful library. It gives API. It gives you amazing opportunities, full control. If you find it very difficult, use GoRouter, Routemaster. There are so many beautiful libraries on top of that. So I think understanding Navigator 2 is also very important. And the other article series after that was that building a single page scrollable website. In the first 5 article parts, in the first one, I talk about using list view builder, lazily building for a single page scrollable website. In the second one, I use page view. In the third one, I use single page scrollable plus column so that items are not loaded lazily. And in the last one, I use another library that does index-based scrolling. So that article series focuses on scrolling plus navigation. And then this is the fourth one. And the next article series that I will be working on, I'm already working on now, is about multi-page scrollable bottom sheet, whose source code is also available on my GitHub. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. This was my first podcast talk.
How do you feel you did?
I think it went very natural. To be honest, I was a bit exhausted, nervous, because, you know, when you're driving a car or riding a bicycle, have you ever had this feeling like, okay, if I take this wheel right, I will die? Like you're in podcast. If you say because there will be so many listeners, unfortunately now we're in the age of like, if you say something wrong, then you might be cancelled. Or, because I'm now talking about my company, if I say something wrong about my company, it's also another risk. So I just wanted to be prepared for this. So yeah, and it was very natural. And thank you very much for being such a great host.
Well, thank you for your time. I know it's not easy to always find time. What time is it for you over there?
Actually, it's great time. It's almost 4 o'clock now. Oh, I can't believe we did 1.5 hours.
Yeah, time goes by when you're having fun, right? So hopefully you're not going to be in trouble at work. So
yeah, I can talk about Flutter really long time.
Yeah. I'm sure your wife is also very happy to hear about this all the time.
No.
You talk with her about it too, or no?
Well, my wife is doing designs for my side projects. She's also a freelancer designer. So I'm trying to find balance. It is really not easy. But Finland, that's why I live in Finland. Finland is about balance. I just came from a long Italy trip. And now I'm working on a startup project with my friend. So I'm providing technology for his startup. It's unofficial now, but maybe after some time it will be official as well. So it will be like side support. But anyway, we are building negotiation skills education, AI-powered negotiation skills education. So the project is that I am writing. I just started from scratch, and it is totally Flutter plus Firebase. Maybe at one point, if it gets success, I will be another guest. I will be guest for your another talk if it gets successful.
Yeah, just feel free to ping me about your new article series and how the company's going, and we may bring it back on. I've already had a couple of people come back, so it's totally fine. I'm always looking for people to come on and to talk about what's going on, because I want to keep everybody in the community kind of updated when they go out running. As I always hear, is everybody says when they go running, they listen to me. So it's good to hear that, my voice is there when you're running.
That's why I feel like podcast is also underrated. Like, I find it extremely useful. And if I wrote this article series, it's just because of those podcasts that I listened. Not only yours, I listened different ones, because I just try to find whatever I find, because producing podcasts is also lots of work. So I'm totally amazed that you are publishing weekly. But yeah, so for example, the podcast that I shared in my articles, there is a reference. It is from Adam Bart and Tim Smith from the first days of article, .NET Rocks, the name of the podcast channel. So please listen to that one. Adam Bart explains really like how Flutter is built from scratch. And if you can get Adam Bart to your channel, I would be super, super excited about it. Think about it.
I may be able to get him on, because if he's working in Fuchsia, I know somebody there, and I'm planning to ask them.
Yes. And you can also watch this talk about rendering pipeline on YouTube. It's 54 minutes. It's also a great talk.
Yeah, I think I started watching that one a few months ago and haven't finished it. But I do remember that it was like constraints down and then actual sizes going up. That's how it's a one-through pass. So
it's
I remember
the motto.
this.
Constraints go down, sizes go up. Parent sets the last word, something like that. There is a great article also. It's also referenced about how this constraints rule, because understanding the constraints rule in Flutter is also very important. And there is an amazing article which is also available in Flutter website, because there was one person who wrote this article and Flutter team really liked it, and they took the article to the Flutter website as it is.
What's the article about again?
Yes. Marcelo Glassberg, Flutter, the advanced layout rule even beginners must know. Hey, maybe you can get him as well in your talk. I'm just having a wish list for you.
Yeah, please. If you have people that you think we should bring on, let us know. And especially if you know which topic, then we can definitely approach them and ask them to come on.
This article I just mentioned, the advanced layout rule even beginners must know. It is the best one. And he is actually the person behind this motto. Constraints go down, sizes go up, positions are set by parents.
Okay, Marcelo Glassberg.
Yes.
Okay, we'll definitely try to reach out to him and see if he's available.
I'm so happy that now we know each other. I can send you my wish list on messages.
Yeah, definitely. I'm always open. So for anybody in the audience, if you think you should come on, or you know somebody who should come on, let me know. I've approached some people, they said no from suggestions, but nearly everybody has replied and said yes that I've actually approached. There's not a lot, surprisingly. So especially if you know this person, it's even easier, right? Because you have the connection.
Okay,
so
perfect.
Right now I don't really know these people, but I'll definitely have to try.
Yeah, but I would say also in Finland we have amazing developers as well. I will also send their names to you.
Please go ahead. Okay. I'm more than happy to chat with them. Even the native devs, right? If I brought in some people. I think you've heard the episode, right, with React Native and stuff, where we brought in some people who don't do Flutter, and I like to hear about what they have to say.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, again, thank you for your time, and
thank you.
Looking forward to your list.
Thank you. See you. Have a nice day.